Hello, my name is Jim Freeman, president of All-Star Baseball and Softball Academy. Here today with Ben Davis. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your relationship with All-Star?
Native of the area, and I got involved with All-Star Baseball Academy several years ago. I used to work out here in the all-season gym. Has been a lifelong friend of mine. And I would come here and work out in the off-season getting ready for spring training. I got drafted back in 1995 by the San Diego Padres, the second overall pick in the first round. I was very fortunate to play parts of 7 years in the big leagues and 16 years professionally overall. And this would be my place. I'd come in and work out, and Jimmy would throw me batting practice. And it's really how I kind of got into All-Star Baseball Academy, and the way the instructors are, the coaches are. I'd come in here to work out, and I'd see these kids getting taught by these instructors, and it really left an indelible impression upon me about if I were to someday have children and what program they would go through. All-Star was obviously my first choice, and my son is 14 years old. This will be his fourth year playing in the All-Star baseball program, and it's just been a godsend. It's been everything I could have hoped for. The amount of time that I travel, I'm on the road a lot. I have to leave my kid in the best hands possible, that where I know he's going to get the best instruction and he's going to be steered in the right direction. That was All-Star.
Yeah, so, and your son's name is Teg.
Yes.
Right? And he's on the 14U team coached by Mike McCardle. Obviously now coaching your son and our relationship in the past, 20 some odd years, what are some of the changes that you see in today's coaching in terms of just the venues and how much baseball kids are playing right now in comparison to what maybe you had done when you were younger?
Well, they definitely have it a lot better than what you and I had. I think it's obviously way more of a hands-on approach. I think when you and I were coming up in Little League, it was basically, roll the ball out and say, go get them, kids. It's definitely not that now.
Yeah.
I think the thing that impresses me the most about All-Star is that hands-on approach. And every kid, and I'm not saying this just because we're doing this, but every kid gets the same amount of attention. Everything is detail-oriented, and it comes across so crisply every time I see a practice, every time I see a game, the way the kids take the field. Back when you and I were, coach would throw batting practice, the kid would hit, and there'd be 14 kids in the outfield shagging, and the next kid would come in. But everything, it's attention to detail, I think, and stressing the fundamentals. And I think that is the biggest key. That's the biggest thing that I've seen in the 4 years here with All-Star.
Yeah, so when you're talking about fundamentals and your son being 14, obviously you've been through 9, 10, 11, 12 with him. Can you give us maybe an idea of how many swings you would recommend for a youth, someone 9 to 12 maybe, and then how that might escalate as they get older? How many ground balls a day, or how many pitches they should throw, or conditioning pieces that you should share some of that.
Yeah, Jimmy, I wouldn't actually put a number on it. I would put how well you're doing each swing, how well you're repeating your mechanics when you're throwing a baseball. Obviously, you want to get to a point where it becomes muscle memory. The more you do it, obviously, the stronger you're going to get. Sure. We talk about some of these younger kids; they just don't have that. They just don't have that muscle yet. To where they can really manipulate a bat and swing and swing and swing and not get overly tired. You don't want to do it to a point where you're just exhausted.
It's not an aerobic sport.
It's not an aerobic sport. So if you go in there, you go take 150 swings a day, and you're out of breath and you're sweating. I think you're doing it the wrong way. You want to make sure you do it the right way and make sure that that's what you get ingrained in your muscle memory.
Yeah. So if you were, and again, if you think about it, because you played at such a high level, your son gets a private lesson almost every day when you go out and work with him, which is great. But for people out there understanding what lessons are like, and as we start to teach them, right, breaking that up like a lesson plan, like in school, is very similar to what you're saying, because I see that a lot where people think that batting practice over and over again is going to be the most productive manner instead of actually working on the swing.
Right, and that getting back to those fundamentals, hitting off a tee, it's something. I was very blessed to play with a lot of great ball players in the big leagues, Hall of Famers, and the one that sticks out the most is Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn had 8 batting titles. He was the best hitter in the National League 8 times, which just blows my mind. And Tony would hit off the tee every day up in the batting cage. And I'm thinking, if Tony Gwynn can hit off the tee, well, then I can hit off the tee, believe me. It's instant feedback. It's doing it, seeing the flight of the ball that goes into the back of the net. That's what it's instant gratification, and that's talk about hone your swing. But getting back to those fundamentals, if you don't have the right fundamentals, you're not going to be successful later on down the road. Whether that be, going from maybe rookie ball in Little League and moving up to the majors in Little League, playing 11 and 12, and then going on the Junior League, and then going on to high school, maybe even ultimately on to college or possibly professional baseball. It's the same game. And I tell people it's the same game. No one ever really believes me. It's just the pace of the game, how fast it's played. But if you don't have those fundamentals instilled in you, you're not going to be successful. And that's one thing I think that really caught my eye. I'd be in here working out, and I would see an instructor. None of the drills were all this. None of the drills were the same. They were all planned out proportionately, and it just flowed. And I will say that the instructors were there for the number one priority was their client, their student. That's the one thing that kind of drew me to them. And there was no downtime, there was no wasted time. Everything was planned out, and it was clockwork. Because you guys have a lot of volume that comes through here, especially in the wintertime. Yeah. So everything has to make sure that the lessons aren't overlapping, and then the next kid, he gets shorted some time. Everything was run perfectly, and again, that was one of the major factors that why I want my kid to be a part of this program.
It's funny just thinking back, and again, being as old as I am, a lot of people I think left baseball because practices were so boring, and baseball's not a very active sport anyway when it's compared to basketball, even football.
Right.
And so, can you speak to that a little bit, because I do see a difference in what is now a product of our practice, which we really do put a focus on how do we keep kids attentive every 15-20 minutes because of how much what the brain can take in, plus keeping them active and mobile to compete with other sports.
Right.
I mean, do you see that in Major League Baseball as well?
Without a doubt, and it's something that I think that it flows so nicely here because again, you have that time frame, and you want to make sure the kids do stay interested, and they're not just standing out there, looking up and waiting for the next ball to come to them. They're involved. If they have an hour and a half practice, they're involved for those 90 minutes. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. Everything, again, is timed out specifically, and it's not, every practice is not the same. So they're doing different drills each time they come in here, and that's what really keeps the flow of the practice moving. Whether they're in here or one of the local high school fields that they have practice on or have access to, there's something for everybody, and each kid is going to learn different positions and how to play. Yeah. And that's huge for me because it is one of those sports, and like you said, there's a lot of other options right now. You can play lacrosse, whatever. But the thing that I've noticed in the 4 years my son has been a part of this, the kids that are on his team this year are the same kids that were on his team 4 years ago. So that speaks volumes to the program and about, nobody's leaving. It's not like, oh, I'm sick of that program, I'm sick of the coaching staff, I'm done. You don't see that, and I think that really does speak volumes about the program.
Yeah, that's great. I have to ask this question because just with instruction and listening to the feedback from a lot of our instructors, one of the biggest things we get in regards to lessons when parents come in and asking questions is, what do we teach? And so without even talking to or even seeing their child yet, they want to know what we teach in terms of hitting, and which brings up a lot of things. And just because of our age, you probably had things that were taught to you when you were 16, and then at 18 it was called something different, and then now there's all sorts of things. And just being here so long, I've been through all that. That we assess each kid, and then we will look at them and say, here's our plan for you to get you better. And each kid, is different within the framework. How do you feel about these, swings that say, here's the swing and it's for everybody kind of thing?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because every swing is not the same. You're going to have guys with different talent. You're going to have guys with different bat speed. Hitting is really is a science, and everyone gets prepared differently. If you were to tell me to go hit like Alex Rodriguez, I can't do it. I don't have that skill set. I don't have his raw talent. I can't be like, I have to do what works best for Ben Davis. You have to do what works best for Jim Freeman. We're not the same. And to try and teach every kid the same way about how to do something, it just won't work. And I think that is one thing that you see coaches throughout the years, I think they kind of fall into that trap sometimes of Johnny and Charlie and Jimmy, they all have to play the same. It can't happen. It just cannot happen. We used to go over scouting reports every day in the big leagues. Go how to attack the opposing lineup. So I'd sit down with the starting pitcher, myself, and the pitching coach, and we would attack accordingly. Now, every pitcher is going to be different. So if I know that I can get Jim Freeman out on a 1-2 slider down and away, then okay, if my pitcher can do that,
right.
then we can then we can attack accordingly. If my pitcher can't do that, then we have to think of something different. And it goes the same way with the coaches, especially kids that are younger. If you try and make every kid the same, you're going to fail from a coaching standpoint. And I think that's one thing. Another great thing that All-Star does is the fact that the kids aren't robots. You can't make every kid throw 4-seamers at the top of the zone and breaking balls below the zone. It just won't happen.
Yeah.
You just can't have that happen. And I think that's really, it sets them apart from that aspect.
Yeah. So give me an example of so when you're out coaching, what type of scouting do you do against other teams? What other kind of feedback do you get the kids prepared with that you see that you can use your knowledge from playing in the big leagues to translate into 14-year-old baseball?
Right. Well, that's
if any.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I think it's if a team is just flat out better than you, most of the time they're going to beat you, right? But what really hurts is when the team beats themselves, right? When they don't do the fundamentals, they don't catch the ball, hit the ball, or throw the ball properly, they're going to lose, right? And that's one thing that you can't have the kids do. You learn from your mistakes. And I think as the kids start to get maybe a little bit older, they can learn a little bit more from their mistakes. But you can't have your team beat themselves, because obviously, sometimes you're just going to have good games, and sometimes you play as well as you can, and sometimes you just lose. You just flat out lose. It's part of it. But at other times, you're going to shoot yourselves in the foot where you make that error. And whether that be a physical error or a mental error, it does happen in the game. We know that. But how often are we going to repeat those things? So that's what I try and teach the kids. Listen, guys, if you keep making the same mistakes, you're not getting any better. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I try and stress with the kids. Like, hey, if your mind's not into the game, then your body's not going to be into the game. We have to make sure that we stay focused the entire time.
Yeah. When you're watching your son play, and you look at baseball in general, the other teams he's playing in the tournament fashion that they're playing, and do you look at and say, kids just don't do this anymore, but I remember it being different when I was younger?
Yeah, I think definitely now it's more attention to detail. I really would say that. And again, the kids have so many more opportunities, and they play on these spectacular fields and the turf fields, and right. They have all these different opportunities, which is great. But I think it goes down to basically, how much do these kids want it? How much can they stay into it mentally, and really prepare themselves? Because if you're not into it mentally, if you don't want to be there, then don't be there. Go find something else to do, because it's a game that it's thinking ahead is half the battle. It really is. Like, you're playing second base. Okay, there's a man on first base. There's one out. If a ball's hit to my left, where am I going? If a ball's hit to my right, where am I going? This is the thought process you have to have on every pitch. If you don't have it, you're not going to have success. Yeah. And that's one thing that I know. Teg's Coach McCardle, Mike McCardle. Teg has played for him for 4 years. He loves Coach Mike, right? When it's time to play, the kids play. When it's time to be disciplined, they get disciplined. When it's time to have fun, they have fun. And I think that's a great sign of a really good coach that can put those kids in the best positions to win. We recently lost Don Shula, who I know you're a big Miami Dolphins fan. I heard a quote from him today. Yeah, I heard a quote from him today. He said he tried to get the best out of each player, but how that would benefit the team was his main objective. Yeah. And I think if you get the best out of each player individually, it's only going to help the team as a whole. Yeah.
So taking that same question, let's try and apply it to 10-year-olds, because I remember when I first coached a 10-year-old group, I was amazed at signs coming in from the coach to a catcher. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I thought about was, how many pitches does this kid have? He's 10. What's he throwing? I was nervous. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to see this, and see that. And you start seeing the pitches come through, and you're like, what's he doing?
Yeah, how about a strike?
And I just remember when I was 10, I'm like, I just figured the catcher didn't even have signs. I just threw the ball as far as I could every time, and that was the game plan. So when you look at that strategy that coaches have at 10 and 11 and 12, do you see that as a positive? How do you view that? Because your son obviously has gone through that.
Yeah, I wouldn't view it as a positive. Obviously, as a coach, you can make recommendations, but the only way the kids are going to get better and mature is if they have a feel for the game themselves and how the game moves along.
Right, because you were a catcher yourself, so at some point you figured it out.
Right.
And how was that done?
Well,
what do you credit?
Well, I credit just watching the game. I mean, you can learn so much. there were times when I would go out to the mound and I said, listen, we got to throw this guy another fastball. He's hitting balls sideways. He's late on everything. And the pitcher wants to speed his bat up, throw an all-speed pitch. I said, are you watching the same at bat that I'm watching? Because why would we want to speed his bat up? You can learn so much and gather so much information just from simply watching. Yeah. And I think that's something. I think some of the coaches that get a little ahead of themselves and think these 10-year-olds are 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, and they're taking that part of the game out of their hands, and the kids really aren't learning. So, from a coaching standpoint, let these kids make. Maybe at a younger age, let them make those mistakes so they can learn from them. Then you sit them down and say, hey, listen, Jimmy, why did that happen? Well, I don't know. Well, no, that's not the answer I'm looking for. This happened because of this. And then the kid can learn and mature moving forward.
Yeah, I just know that, and I know we're on the same page, we've always talked offline, but I used to always talk to my pitchers when they were 10, 11, and 12, and they'd always want to throw an off-speed pitch or some kind of crazy pitch, and they're always begging, Coach, can I throw a curveball? Coach, can I do this? And we're 0-2 on a guy who swung through 2 fastballs and had no shot, and they just don't want to throw the third one. I'm like, he's not kidding around. He can't hit that pitch.
Right.
I'm like, if he wanted to hit the first 2, he would have.
Right.
He's not setting you up, and it isn't the big leagues right now, right? So, especially when you see their face after they swing,
right.
And that was one of the things I look at, because I feel like there's too much, sometimes too much coaching where we're trying to trick the player who doesn't need to be tricked and just keep throwing pitches.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, sometimes the answer is so obvious you have trouble believing that it is that obvious. But just watch the game. The game will explain so much to you, and trying to outthink these. Baseball is, again, it's a simple fight. You catch it, you throw it, and you hit it. Right. Yeah. If we overthink that at times, because the game is hard enough as it is. If we start to overthink it and we get in between our ears, get caught up in the game, it's going to really slow everything down, and we're not going to be able to think for ourselves and react. Baseball is such a reactive game. Yeah,
less is better sometimes.
Yeah.
So with that said, I wanted to talk just a little bit. We talked a little bit about swings, and a lot of people may not know this about you, Ben, but you finished up as a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
You had an unbelievable arm. How do you feel about pitching in general, rehab? I know you had to rehab your arm at one point with Tommy John, but obviously anyone who goes through rehab then becomes hypersensitive to how to fix their arm. Everything you're doing for rehab is really all preventive measures as well.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about kids throwing, the pitch counts, and some of the things that you can do for your arm, to take preventative action against any type of surgeries and things like that?
Yeah, not only just pitching, but not only just taking care of your arm, but your body in general. Yes. Stretching is such a huge factor. I still like to think I'm pretty flexible. I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'5", 240, but still stay pretty flexible and limber. I try to be as much as possible, but it was a huge part of my growing up process. I was always stretching my arm. In the wintertime, I'd be sitting there watching the show with my folks and inching my arm up the wall just to stretch out the ligaments and doing the sleeper stretch. Just while you're sitting there watching television, you can get better that way. I'm a big fan of throwing a lot. I just am. I long tossed every day when I was playing professional baseball. It was something I think that kept my arm in shape, and it kept me from getting a sore arm. Yes, I did have Tommy John. That was just normal wear and tear. Yeah. At some point, you throw a lot of balls. Sometimes stuff happens, but I was blessed with a very good arm, and I think the more I threw, the better my arm felt.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like as much as you work out in the off season, you go to spring training, you just get that soreness in there from not. Sure. But once you start doing it every day, your arm feels like $1,000,000. I don't like the pitch counts. I really don't. Now if a pitcher goes 100 pitches in the big leagues, it's like, oh my God, way to go. You throw 100 pitches today. Way to go. I just don't think it's something that I think it's way overemphasized. I do. But I think the more you throw, the better your arm is going to be in the long run.
Yeah. And listen, I agree with you 100%. I do understand parents, because they hear a word, they hear a number, and then they're oh my gosh.
Right.
But I always, and you being a catcher, I'm sure you felt it more than I saw it as a coach. But I would always look at pitchers and their velocity and their breaking pitches. I'm talking about high school level kids. Mm-hmm. But when you would look at when to take someone out, it'd be when they weren't finishing, when they were really tired and they just didn't have the same bite on their fastball. And it typically, as a coach, I would always go out and ask the catcher, behind, not in front of the pitcher, but
Right.
what do you think? And usually when you had a good catcher, they would give you that. So, I mean, do you think that's a better method than necessarily going through, he's at pitch number 97? Because I have seen kids that when they're spent early and they throw 32 pitches, let's say, in the first 2 innings or inning and a half or whatever,
Right.
they would come in. Sometimes they're just tired and fatigued then that they can't bounce back
Right.
after that.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone who's throwing, 12 pitches, 15, 20, and then he goes back and then he's building momentum at the end.
Yeah. Some guys get stronger as they go on, but I think there's a lot of different signs that you can look for. A guy not finishing pitches, guys just throwing up in the zone, again, because he's not finishing.
Right.
You can look at the pace as to which he's pitching out there. As he's a guy, he gets it and throws it, gets it and throws it. All of a sudden, he's slowing down out there, trying to catch his breath a little bit more. Maybe that is something you can look for as well. But I think you also have to look at how stressful were the pitches. If a guy comes into a game and it's, he gets the first inning and he ends up throwing 30 pitches, but the bases were loaded, didn't allow any runs, every pitch that he throws in that inning is a stressful pitch. Not only on your arm, but mentally, you're going through that. And how stressful were those? If a kid's just out there coasting along, he throws, there's nobody on base and he's throwing 75, 80 pitches through 6 innings, he's just dealing. I mean, obviously that's not stressful at all.
Right.
There's a lot of different factors that go into that, but there are some telltale signs, again, throwing up in the zone, not finishing his pitches, and just basically losing command in general. But I think you look for more than that than just the pitch count. I think sometimes we get hypersensitive to that number. To me, there's really no difference between 80 pitches and 110.
Yeah, it's funny because I would always observe opposing teams' coaches when you're playing AAU baseball, whatever, and you'd see a pitcher get up in the 4th inning, the 5th inning, the 6th inning, and you'd see how many pitches he throws. No one's watching him.
Right.
And then they bring him in. I'm like, he's already thrown a game.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you see it in high school, you see it in college.
Right.
Do you have any feeling about what is the proper amount of warm-up you need to get into a game? Is there anything as a catcher you would use as a barometer?
Some guys get ready different. I know of guys that, the phone would ring in the bullpen and the guy would get up, do this a couple times and throw 5 pitches, wave his hat, I'm ready to go.
Right.
I think it's some guys just take longer. They just flat out take longer. Trevor Hoffman in San Diego, he was a guy that liked to throw a few extra pitches in the bullpen. But if Bruce Bochy really needed Trevor Hoffman to come in the game, Hoffy was ready to go take his 8 pitches out on the mound. But it's. I also look at it, Jimmy. You talk about the parents. Well, Johnny's out there. He's got a sore arm. Well, when was the last time Johnny pitched? Okay, he went out and threw 80 pitches. The next day he's sore. Well, next time he pitches might be the next week in the game. That's why I'm saying that the more you throw, you're not going to have that downtime. Where if I go out and run 5 miles right now, I'm not going to be able to walk for a week because I don't do it every day, right?
Yeah.
So I think the more you get in tune with that, the less sore you're going to be because you're using those muscles every day.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. So with that conditioning phase in there, are there things you can do with your legs for your arms that you found to be productive for yourself and or you're doing with your son?
Well,
because you mentioned conditioning, and that's why.
Yeah, conditioning is obviously a huge factor, and right now, if in winter months where you don't have such a nice day, I know the weather's starting to get a little bit better out there, but there's so many just stretching in general, and I would say for the younger kids, I'm not a huge proponent of lifting weights per se, but I think body weight is something that I wish I would have done, maybe started a little bit sooner when I was growing up. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. I think pull-ups are the best thing you could possibly do. Yeah. So I think that's a really telltale sign of strength and how you can get stronger. But honest to goodness, stretching is huge. And the more you stretch, the better off you're going to be. Whether that be your legs, I mean, everything is foundational, right? You can't have a big building with small little foundation. You got to have strong legs and flexible legs, and especially if you're a catcher, infielder. You have to be agile, and the more you stretch, the better off you're going to be, and you can do that again just sitting in front of the television watching a show. There's just a lot of things you can do, but body maintenance and making sure you take care of your body is huge.
It's funny, one of the drills that I used to always like to give younger kids was the mirror drill. Swing the bat in the mirror, so you could see yourself, make sure your head is still, your eyes are on your eyes.
Right.
Is there an amount of swings that you would recommend for a young kid? Let's say a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old. How many swings is there a limit? Is it, I mean, just dry swings?
Yeah, I don't know if there's really a limit, but again, you got to make sure you're doing it the right way. I can take this bat right now and swing it 100 times like this. It's not doing me any good unless I do it the right way.
Sure.
So I wouldn't really put a number on it. I would just say if you get to a point where you start to feel a little bit fatigued, or maybe put it down and then come back 5 minutes later and take a few more. But the more you can do it, the better off we're going to be. We're going to build that muscle memory up, and we're going to build those swing muscles up.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that I see sometimes that gets taken advantage of at the youth levels. And then by the time kids, at least as a pet peeve for me as a high school coach, I just saw base running going, like people just did not, or kids didn't really understand base running. It wasn't something that was taught. And I know we focus on that a lot at the Academy. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would have in terms of tips for where you see that kids could get better at? Particularly at 14, now that you're dealing with the bigger field, obviously.
Putting pressure on the defense, I think, is something that we can do. We all can do a little bit better, mm-hmm. At any level. But again, getting back to watching the game, studying the game. Yeah. If Timmy in right field's got a cannon and there's a ball hit to the right side, I know I'm not going to go first or third. It's just from studying the game and watching the game and figured out I can't do that. But if I am a faster guy, maybe I do want to put a little pressure. The scoreboard is a huge dictator of how you play the game. Yeah. You got to do is look at the scoreboard and say, maybe this is an opportune time for me to put a little bit more pressure on the defense. Maybe we're up by 2 or 3 runs. Maybe that extra added run might be a big insurance run in this ball game. Maybe I'd put a little bit of pressure on the defense. If I get thrown out, so be it, when we're still up 2 or 3 runs. Yeah. But obviously the scoreboard will dictate how you play the game. But just watch the game and realize what you think you can get away with to put as much pressure on the defense without making your team suffer.
Yeah, and I know you played with Ricky Henderson, mm-hmm. and you were kind of in that in-between in your era in regards to when you played a slide step, and some older pitchers might have had, like, you want to talk a little bit about that, because everyone now has a slide step.
Yeah, it's
and catchers today, I mean, with their arms and, I would love to see you play in today's game, just because I don't think anyone will be able to steal one because of the slide steps. But I was amazed at how many kids, and I started teaching it as well, slide steps at 12 and at 13 and at 14, that it's a lot harder to steal bases, and it's almost like forgotten.
It is like a forgotten art, and there's a lot of records in baseball, I think, that might be broken one day, but that's still on base record. No one's getting that.
No one's getting it.
No one's getting that anymore.
Yeah.
But you're right. It does make it a lot tougher. And I think it makes it a little tougher on the pitchers as well, because if you're not accustomed to doing that slide step, then you start jumping out there, your arm falls behind, you start leaving pitches up. That's mm-hmm. a different story. But I think from a base running standpoint, it really disrupts even if you get a pitcher out there that holds the ball, and then you have a base threat out there, that really throws off the timing of the base runner. It makes it that much harder, let alone it throws off the timing of the hitter at home plate. So it does make it that much more difficult to steal a base. That being said, if you think you can do it, maybe the catcher doesn't have as good an arm. If you can still get out there a little bit farther, and just as long as you realize you can get back to first base if he does pick over, but it doesn't make it impossible, it just makes it a little bit harder.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up was the multi-positions. Mm-hmm. Youth, kids, I always talk to parents about, why isn't my son playing shortstop? How come my son, he's better than this, and I would always say, well, I'm not going to be your high school coach, right. And you're going to want to learn to field ground balls and, fly balls, and you're going to get put where you get put by your size, strength of arm, and everything else. Right. How do you feel about multiple positions in the field and learning that? Because I know that you played a lot of positions.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, there is a fine line between learning the position and knowing how to play it.
Yeah.
If you're just not good enough to play it, then you're going to find a different spot.
Right.
But I mean, if you can do it, it's only going to make you that more valuable on a ball club. We're seeing this in the big leagues all the time. Yeah. The more versatile you are, like a Scott Kingery. Scott Kingery is very versatile. Ben Zobrist. I mean, this guy can play all over the field. He literally can play 7 positions if he asked him to. So I think that goes a long way. And the more versatile you are, it's one thing to play a position, but you have to play it well if you're going to play there. But the more versatile you are, you have to be able to learn those positions. I know my son is left-handed, so obviously that's going to rule out him playing third base or catcher
Right.
or shortstop. So if he can play first base or the outfield adequately, obviously that makes him versatile and to a coach or to a different program. So some things he can do, some things he can't do. But I think that the more versatile you can become and the more adept you are at playing all the positions, it's only going to help you out.
Yeah.
But if he can't play there, then you shouldn't be playing there.
Yeah, no, you never want to put a young player, especially a young player, in a position where they're going to fail consistently,
Right.
and it's just going to make them or push them away from the game.
Yeah.
So we've talked about conditioning, we've talked about base running and fielding and pitching. How do you feel about multi-sports for these kids? We obviously grew up in an age where it was a little bit different in regards to, in the fall someone did something, in the wintertime, and then in the spring, and then obviously in the summer you played baseball. How do you feel about that now? Because kids are being torn. Even when I was coaching in high school, 10 years ago, every sport wanted a piece of all the good athletes.
I'm a big proponent of playing multiple sports. I really am. I think it's just going to help you. If you know that, say baseball is your main sport, obviously baseball I think is the most hand-eye coordinated sport there is. I think if you play the other sports, it's only going to enhance those abilities that you have on the baseball field. You're going to be using different muscles that you typically wouldn't be using for baseball. If you're playing football or basketball, obviously they're more of cardio sports. They're only going to help you from a cardiovascular way for playing the game. I think it's great. You look at Urban Meyer when he was at Ohio State a couple years ago. He wasn't always going after the kid that ran a 4.2 40. He was going after the kid that maybe ran a 4.35 4.4 40 if he played other sports, because he said that makes that player that much better for hand-eye coordination, and it's just the total development of you as an athlete. I think it's certainly going to enhance your baseball abilities if you play other sports.
Right. So this leads into another question in regards to the metrics which you brought up. Baseball for the older kids, and your son is kind of at the beginning stages of that level where you almost get in. When you're in the ninth grade, obviously you're on the board, right? But it is very metrics driven. The 60, velocity, bat speed, all those things. How do you feel about that? And what would you recommend in regards to how are you going to talk to your son about things of that nature? Because it wasn't necessarily that crazy when you were drafted.
No, it wasn't. I mean, there were definitely
Metrics.
things. Yeah, there were things that. Yeah, I remember I ran the 60 in 2 days. It was great. It definitely is more numbers oriented now. But I'm just going to tell him, hey, that's not the end all be all.
Yeah.
If you run a 6.8 60, that's great. Good for you. That doesn't mean you can hit a curveball. It doesn't mean you can lay off a curveball in the dirt. It doesn't mean you can go first to third because you got a good secondary lead. All those are different intangibles that are part of the game that I think we lose track of. It's great. Numbers are great. If you have a high spin rate on your fastball and you can throw 95, 96, well, that's great. But can you locate that fastball?
Yeah.
That's the thing that I'm looking for. If you were to tell Jamie Moyer that he would end up with, I think Jamie had 252 wins. The guy threw 84 miles an hour and pitched for 30 years in the big leagues. If you were to tell Jamie Moyer you can never pitch in the big leagues because you throw 84, you'd be like, there's no way.
I guess that's why I'm asking the question for all the parents and folks out there, that they can understand that at some point, whether it's in college, in high school, and even in the big leagues, at some point they're going to ask you to perform.
Right.
I mean, that's going to happen.
You got to play. I can tell you that I'm the best chef in the world. I can tell you I can make anything. And you come to my house and say, okay, Ben, let me see it. Let me see you cook.
Yeah.
Let me see how great you are in the kitchen. Same way on the baseball field. Someone might tell you you're the greatest player, but at some point you have to perform. You have to play the game of baseball. If you're good enough, they will find you.
Yeah.
They will. But don't get caught up in all these numbers like, well, Johnny did this and Johnny did that, and you put Johnny out on the field and he doesn't know how to go first and third. He can't get that good secondary lead on second base and score on a single.
Yeah.
So those are all the different intangibles I think that really go into the game. Don't get caught up in those numbers so much where you lose track of actually playing the game and playing it the right way. If you're good enough, they'll find you.
It's funny because when I was taking a team through the recruiting process, and it was probably in July, and some kids had gotten some looks and some other kids hadn't, and we were at a big tournament with coaches, and all the coaches wanted to know is, how are they hitting? How many hits do they have?
Right.
It wasn't about spin rates and bat exit speed. It was about, hey, he had 2 hits today.
Yeah.
And it turned back into what they really want is production for them to win games.
Right.
And that's the tough part, because it is so metrics driven, but at some point you are asked to play the game.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a tough place to navigate.
Yeah.
And at 14, your son's getting ready to go into high school next year, which is a whole new ball of wax. But it's a great opportunity. He's playing now, and you'll start seeing some more velocity at 14, hopefully, than you saw at 13. 13 is tough to
It is.
watch.
That's tough when they get on that bigger field. It's like the game just completely slows down.
Yeah.
But that is a great point. So don't get caught up in the result. Don't be so result oriented. Say your kid goes out and hits 4 duck farts over the first baseman, and he's screwed. I was 4 for 4 today. And then the guy that's hitting behind him hit 4 lasers, and he lined out. He's 0 for 4. What do you think a scout or a protective, a college coach might say? He'd rather see that kid hit 4 rockets. Yeah, it was 0 for 4, but look at the bat speed he generated. Look how hard he hit those balls. And this kid's at first base. Yeah, I went 4 for 4 today, but he hit 4 bleeders.
Yeah.
What do you think the scout would rather see? He'd rather see that crisp swing, balls being hit hard off the bat. So I think listen, I'm fall victim to it at times. I'm sure you have as well. You get so result oriented that your kid's out on the mound. My kid hit 85 today. He's only 15 years old. He's throwing 85. Yeah, he hit 10 guys and walked 4. So it's like, oh, that's great. He threw 85. He has no idea where it's going. So I think from that aspect, we get so result oriented that it's just we lose track of how the game should be played, and are we playing it the proper way?
Yeah. So kind of leads into another question in regards to the whole recruitment piece, and I'm sure you've dealt with it, and I just played with you, knowing you always handled adversity well. You always handled situations well on the field with older people, younger people, whatever it would be. You had a very good temperament. Did that ever play into your favor in regards to when you were being recruited? I know you ended up getting drafted out of high school, but I think a lot of kids miss the fact that it's important that on the field attitude and what they need to do when they fail at a sport that you're going to fail at.
Right.
You want to speak to that a little?
Well, I know it's so cliche, but we are going to fail at baseball more than we're going to have success. We're going to make 7 outs out of 10. And if I get those 3 hits, I'm going to Cooperstown, right? So it is so we get so wrapped up in the failure of it. I think we lose track of how we handle ourselves. I think I was very fortunate. I have 2 wonderful, great parents, loving parents, who never said anything to me when I was on the field, ever. And you can ask any one of my friends, you've witnessed it.
Oh, yeah.
No, they never said anything, ever, to me while I was on the field. After the game, if they noticed something, they might say something to me. Ben, I think you could have done this, you should have done that, or nice job with that. That was really good. You really, obviously, you could tell that you thought that ahead. But I think I never like to see, when I struck out, which I did a lot, I didn't want the pitcher to see that he got the best of me. I think baseball players are very prideful people, right? We have big egos at times, and we know we're doing the hardest thing to do in all sports, and that's try and hit a baseball or pitch a baseball and strike somebody out or whatever that might be. But I didn't want that guy to see that he got the best of me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to shrug my shoulders, walk off. First of all, my dad would have his foot up my butt. But secondly, I didn't want that kid to see that he got the best of me.
Yeah.
We sometimes we see these attitudes where kids are crying when they strike out. That can't happen. It should not happen. If you get to that point where that takes all the fun out of the game, we're not having fun. Why are we playing the game if we're not having fun? But that whole mental process goes into it. Well, I didn't want this guy to see me that he got the best of me. There's no way. And I'll be damned. I'm going to get him my next time up.
Yeah.
Because you may have got me once. You may even get me the next time. You may get me the entire game. But the next time I get you, I'm going to get you then.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it that goes into it. From a mental aspect, it's easier said than done because we're going to go through peaks and valleys as a baseball player. But the more we can keep level-headed, I think that was something that I think that the scouts saw with me. I like to think that I was level-headed and didn't let the highs, I didn't get too high, didn't get too low. You kind of stay right there in the middle and take it as it comes.
Can you expand on that? Because I think that, again, it kind of dovetails off the conversation we had about metrics of what parents, and it's not a knock on parents, it's what the information through Twitter and all these social media outlets come out and say you have to do this, you have to do this, and then we get programmed a certain way just to try and break through some of that. With metrics and everything else, how important is it to have a level head when you're in that recruiting process from, let's say, 15 all the way through to the end when you sign on the dotted line of whatever college you're going to go to?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy because you have all these guys coming at you and wanting you to play. So that aspect, you think, hey, man, I'm pretty good. Yeah, everybody wants a piece of me, right? And then maybe you're not getting as recruited as heavily as you thought. And you think, man, I must not be as good as I really think I am.
Right.
You know, so there is that fine line there where you don't want your head to get so big and you don't want to get so down if it's on the reverse side. So if you go into that process, it's almost like, hey, there's people looking at me because obviously I did something right. How can I continue to do those things right and kind of eliminate some of the things I'm not doing as right, just so more people continue to look at me? Vice versa, if there's not as many people looking at me, what am I doing wrong? Is there something that I'm doing wrong, or maybe I'm not working hard enough, or maybe there's a glaring flaw that I have that I need to get better at, and I'm going to dedicate all my time to getting better with that. But the more we go through this process, we start to get recruited by more and more teams. It's always good to have that good level head, because this game will bite you. It'll bite you back. As good as you think you are, you might be 4 for 4 one day, and then you might go 0 for the next week.
Yeah.
So that's just the way it is. That's the nature of the game, nature of the beast. So the more we can keep a level-headed mind, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. Listen, Ben, I appreciate it. I just had one last thing, if you could just share with some of the parents, any other tips for kids that are going through that recruiting process, or even just young kids that are just getting ready to play baseball, little league, and whatever it would be, just a tip that you maybe gave your son that when he was younger, or even now you still consistently give.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want him to, and I think a lot of people look at, because of what I was very fortunate to achieve in the game, people may look at my son and say, I think sometimes he feels the pressure of, I have to be like my dad. I have to, do this or do that because my dad was a big league baseball player.
Sure.
I think from that aspect, I first and foremost, I said, Tag, I want you to have fun. Have fun. The reason we play in this game is to have fun. I guarantee you, when I was a kid, if I didn't have fun playing baseball, I wasn't going to play.
Yeah.
So I think that just make sure your kids have fun and enjoy the game, and get out there and practice. We're only going to get better if we practice. And this is not something that you just do in the summertime. Oh, there's a tournament down in Aberdeen next week. We're going to go down there and play there. That's great. But then you don't do anything in the meantime to make yourself better. And it has to be a mindset that you gotta have it. If you want to go to the next level, whether that be moving on the teener ball or high school or college ranks or even professional, it has to be a mindset that's going to just be with you all the time, and how you can get better on a daily basis. Whether that just be laying down and stretching a little bit more, or running down and banging out 20 pull-ups. Going outside and trying a tree limb, doing 20 pull-ups. It takes 5 minutes, but it's only going to make you better in the long run. And I think that everybody's son is not going to be the next Mike Trout. And I think sometimes we may think he is, but the bottom line is that they're few and far between. Yeah. So I would just say, let your kids have fun, let them enjoy the game, let them enjoy being with his teammates and having fun. And that's really all I have to say with regards to that.
It's really what makes the game so great.
Yeah.
So listen, I really appreciate you coming out and speaking to us today, and all the families at All-Star Baseball Academy about this great game. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Jim.